Yeah. Good afternoon. Yes, thanks. So,
Yes, thank you.
I
Welcome.
well, thank you for for
Yes,
switching languages. That was helpful to me. I'm afraid like many Anglophone people, I'm relatively limited in my
yes,
language. So I think when you have an African colleague on a radio phone-in who's able to switch between 4 or 5 regional languages as well as English within his presentation, I think you realise the problem with being a native English speaker is not obvious which would be the next language to learn unless you have some particular affiliation with another country. I do have a presentation which kind of follows on from what Professor Asiri has just said, specifically about Asiri University, which is another initiative with which I'm involved in addition to his startup university, which is actually the creation of a colleague of mine in the UK, the head of my department at the University of Bolton in north of Manchester. His origins, he's a Palestinian with British and Jordanian nationality, and he's established a research institute which is based in Switzerland, which is similar in many ways to what John Callow was describing in terms of being very inclusive, open, and exploratory. And we're in the process of establishing a Centre for Pan-African Studies there. And the intention of that is to be a resource for both Africa and the diaspora and other people engaged with African issues, which will be a network of the networks that exist, because constantly I'm finding initiatives like Osiri, which is, if you like, a diaspora initiative, but very much focused on students across the continent. And I had a brilliant cohort of students earlier this year. And incredible ingenuity within the continent of building on the indigenous knowledge we heard of, and that focus of collective Ubuntu, and drawing in, and not simply adopting, but assimilating technologies from elsewhere. And I think that's, to my mind, tremendously exciting. And if you couple that with what is often regarded as the demographic bonus of being the youngest continent on the planet at a time when many of the more economically and technically advanced nations are basically aging populations for all sorts of reasons, then I think the potential for Africa in terms of the challenges that we're meeting as a planet in climate change and resources and so forth is revealed. And I think it's a very exciting time to be involved in these initiatives. So would it be possible for me to share my screen if I try that?
right, please.
Yeah, if I can get the right piece of so can people see this presentation now?
Not yet.
No,
yet.
not
Okay.
yet.
So right. Let's see what's happening. Hang on. I can see whether I've. Oh. All right. Okay. Right. This is my fault. I think that might be a bit better. Is that visible now?
It's coming. He says
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks. That was my fault. So thanks. So really.
Well, it hasn't shown up yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Try again.
Okay, let's just do another share.
I see your presentation here. To me, it's clear.
Oh, you see it?
This is,
Is it there now?
A framework, so network, just
yes, that's right. A framework for
yes.
That's correct.
No,
Yeah. So can everybody see it, or well, I can certainly talk through to it. So if you can't see the slides, I can give you the commentary. But essentially, this is just explaining the philosophy behind the centre. Just to talk about the location, I've said a bit about its location in the Hume Institute in Lausanne in Switzerland. that context and the purpose and the first steps that we're now taking. So the centre's been running for a number of years now, and there are a number of different centres, and some of them have synergy with this centre. There's a Centre for Trafficking, Exploitation and Modern Slavery Studies, which affects, I think, not just areas of Africa with indentured and trafficked labour, but also the advanced economies increasingly, and centres for other areas. And these have attached to them corresponding PhD programs that are actually conducted with partner institutions. So really, as I say, it's a strategic centre really emphasising engagement and knowledge exchange with both researchers and practitioners. So really looking at unleashing the potential of the African continent. So first and foremost, it's about engagement with existing networks of researchers and practitioners, research analysis, conducting events like this one online and also in person, producing publications, presentations, and hopefully moving on to training and capacity building. And another activity which Professor Mucci and myself are involved in is from his university, Schweiner University, with taking graduating students and again giving them the opportunity to develop their skills into viable business propositions where they can not simply join a queue of unemployed graduates, but can become employers of their peers and developing goods and services of value to their communities. So there's a number of links outward from the centre into, I think, some very valuable activities. We have a range of people. Professor Mucci is the chairman. I'm director, along with my colleague Saston, who's from Malawi, but based in the UK. And we have colleagues from across Africa and within the diaspora, and other researchers have been engaged with Africa. And we're identifying now some senior research fellows who'll be associated with it and bringing in their skills and experience. It's really about the switch from that end of the Cold War binary divide into a more polycentric world. And certainly in the last decades, a lot of issues with the emergence of BRICS as a formal organization, the Belt and Road Initiative from China, if you like, the pushback from some of the more established areas like Europe and the US have had engagement with Africa, but not always in the best way. We still have the problem of differential development. We have the problem of a global infrastructure that often regards areas simply as a resource of raw materials, not fully engaged. And the challenge is for endogenous African development and growth as a contribution to a global system, and not simply as being a supplier of lower value inputs. And of course, with the demands of climate change mitigation, with the needs to move to circular economies that make better use of resources, both human and material, then there is the prospect of increasing competition, whether it's over the basic resources such as food and water, but also the higher value resources of the different materials and rare earths and so forth that are essential to the technologies necessary to engage with some of these global problems. And we've seen through the pandemic period a great deal of supply chain disruption and attempts to bring in more robustness, and with competition, having just listened to the presidential debate where both candidates in the US were complaining about China as though it was some kind of zero-sum game that they're playing rather than a collaborative game, which is a bit disappointing, to put it mildly. We're seeing that within Africa there have been really strong responses to the problems. For example, the issue of the northern vaccine hoarding in the face of a pandemic, that there are initiatives now to bring manufacturing, but also equally importantly, the identification of new strains of virus within Africa, and establishing something like an early warning system for the next potential pandemic. And this is giving rise to opportunities for south-south lateral connection between Africa and other areas. And really a rapid acceleration of the technologies like the one we're using today, but despite some of the technical issues, we're beginning to level the playing field, if you like, through the social learning around the technologies that were necessary during the pandemic. So the key vision of the centre is to create an arena where we can bring together people committed to refining and understanding and appreciation of the contribution of Africa. And of course, Ethiopia, as host of the African Union, is really, if you like, one of the hubs of this activity. And really to build into the value of difference and diversity as equally important resources in a global community. And to provide that platform, addressing key issues that are facing African countries and regions as they move towards the goals of the African Union Agenda 2063. So it's really about both human and other resources and the effective utilization of all of those resources. And we have 5 initial themes: governance, administration, because that's really needed to coordinate. There's a notion of deliberative democracy, which I know Kalle was saying, in some ways Ubuntu, it may be it's of African origin, is in some senses a unique philosophy, but you'll find the influence spreading out into other areas. And the concept of deliberative democracy that's been identified is very similar to that kind of I think what the Japanese call ringi, where there's a building of consensus. It's not a simple direction, but an evaluation and a consensus building possible. And in the wake of a colonial division, there are cross-border constraints that remain. But interestingly, those equally remain in places like Europe, despite the development of an EU single market. Those cross-border constraints and issues, again, is something where an Ubuntu approach is one that directs you to overcoming them rather than hiding behind these relatively artificial barriers. And of course, African Union Agenda, I think 2063 really is a blueprint from which these frameworks can be developed. And of course, there's the issue of geography and governance in a continent of 54 nations, and dealing with some of the, I think, increasingly engaging with those post-colonial issues, the development of regional economic collaborations and other stepping stones towards a long-term continental free trade goal. And I think another colleague, John Mugabe, argues that you can't build that continental level without the development and the strength of regional associations and bringing those together. So a form of bottom-up development, not a simple top-down mandate. And I think that's the way to build a resilient structure for the continent. And again, there is that need for policies, initiatives that improve those regional collaborations. And there's so much going on at the grassroots is very positive in different parts of the continent. We have things like the Africa-Europe Radio Astronomy Program, which operates in Southern Africa, which has brought the benefits of scientific research right down into the almost every level of education. For example, in South Africa, using astronomy as a means to engage children into the science, technology, engineering, mathematical subjects are so important for development. And an international school satellite project which encourages school children in secondary education to design microsatellites, and a competition to have a certain number of them actually put into orbit. So really, what in many areas is a kind of elite, high level basic science can actually be harnessed right down to literally the village level to engage children in more effective education. A colleague, British Ugandan, who's built a network particularly aimed at women tech entrepreneurs right across the continent. Excuse me. Really, again, connecting a whole range of initiatives, sharing the technical and social learning that's gone on with those. The Southern African Research, that's an Regional Universities Association, which is looking at issues of right now of transferability of credit between different countries and regions, which would enable students to move around as they do under some of the EU programs, which so-called Erasmus programs, where you can move during your studies to different locations and different jurisdictions to increase the depth of your learning. And the emergence of a formal BRICS association coming from which was 20 years ago just a clever idea about where the next wave of development might go after the so-called Asian tiger economies, has now become an interesting vehicle for South-South collaboration, and that in turn has elicited a response which has led, I think, to more equitable North-South relationships where other people don't want to be excluded from some of these prospects. And I think the importance of modern communications in reconnecting with diasporas, turning what for a long time is regarded as brain drain of loss of talent from less developed or peripheral areas into the centres where there are better resources, can now be turned into a brain circulation, both physically with people coming back, but also with modern communication. You find evidence of Chinese and Indian enclaves within Silicon Valley that are connected back to both of those countries and regions, and the engagement with African scientists and engineers in the diaspora, increasingly sharing their commitment to the development not just of their own careers but also of their home continent. And I think again, the flux created by some shifts in technology, there's a lot of excitement about artificial intelligence at the moment, but there are other aspects of so-called Industry 4.0, which I think do give an opportunity for a more equitable engagement from regions of Africa into global value chains, and a better prospect of control with that. And I think, as I said at the beginning, I think from moving simply from adopting a technology that might have been optimized for other priorities into an assimilation. We've seen the example, I think quite often quoted, of the use of drones for delivery of medical supplies in Rwanda, the use of communications technology starting with relatively simple phones and texting for giving support to early career teachers in relatively remote communities where they can have a peer support as well as other online support, something that's grown with the availability of better technology. The very clear advantages of fintech, which has been developed for African conditions in helping small businesses grow. And this is all about social learning, leveraging the technical learning. And again, that's the element of Ubuntu in that grassroots evolution, which is the way to avoid the pitfalls of trying to just layer imported solutions onto African problems, building back with the African understanding, the regional understandings across the continent, and feeding back into the mix. And this is where Africa starts to make, I think, a strong contribution beyond the continent in coming up with innovative solutions to problems. And we have organizations like AfricaLix, which is based on GlobalX. Again, a network for learning, innovation, building competence, which around the pandemic, I think has graduated from face-to-face more to online, giving the advantages, for example, being able to run virtual doctoral consortia for students right across the continent to share their experience and their learning. And I think a particular value, the understanding of Ubuntu moving from the basic STEM mantra of science, technology, engineering increasingly is being understood to add in an A, which stands for art, creativity, and cultural specifics. The diversity of African cultures and traditional knowledge can be brought in and combined with the more formal, westernized, if you like, knowledge, and that is where you start to add real value to products that makes them both culturally appropriate to settings, but also more desirable in terms of the creativity that has gone into them. And again, quoting Osiri University as an example of one of the ways of building that out. And you've heard a bit more of that from Callan. And the criticality of that indigenous grounded knowledge, and the understanding of what for a while has been termed as soft power. We've seen, for example, Chinese and Indian traditional medicine making inroads into Western settings. I think there's huge potential there to engage with the richness of cultures across Africa, and we've just seen just that one core example in the calendar that we're celebrating today, which have been left out of the, if you like, out of the loop in the search for solutions to mounting global problems. So we have an advisory board. We're engaging with existing networks, and we're in the process of planning some initial webinars, moving to an online conference for early next year, which is likely to look at the issues around water as a key resource for both human life but also development, and also a very strong regional studies association that exists globally, has a number of divisions in North, South America, Europe, and China. But at the moment, there isn't an Africa division, and yet I think there are a number of important researchers who could be joined into this network. So that's a parallel project we have to promote that particular development of regional economists and geographers across the continent, and to connect into this wider network. And so that's really just an overview of where we're up to with this project. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Professor Stephen Little, for explaining. Am I audible?
Yes, you are very audible.
The technology is a bit complicated. I think we're having a lot of challenges. It's when you're presenting, sometimes it breaks. I don't know why. But this idea that the Center for Pan-African Studies, which also involves, from the West, from the rest of the world, that we had colonialism. Now we need people like you who reject colonialism. So it's so good to have you to be involved in facilitating Pan-Africanism, and also to make sure that all Africans know how to work together and unite with each other and not fight each other. And I think this is very good. Also, the indigenous knowledge that was created from all of us, is very rich, and a lot of it has also been taken when the colonialism happened. A lot of manuscripts, many were taken, and they are everywhere in the global, everywhere, in America, Germany, France, Britain, everywhere, France, Italy, everywhere, Portugal, everywhere. So we